We're live! Welcome back, everybody. It's time for, yes, you guessed it, episode 16, 1-6 of our amazing, fantastic series, How Do You Solve a Problem with Maria and Gareth. How are you doing today, Maria? Everything okay?
Yes, much better now.
Fantastic. That's great to know. Fantastic, fantastic. And this is a really, really, really great one we're going to do today. We've been looking forward to this for ages. It's about collaboration and it's about communication and it's about giving presentations, but in the context of interviews, right, Maria? Doing
Yes.
those interviews, very important skill.
Well, yeah, because a lot of people get very nervous. It's a very important part of academic progression when you're hired for your first fellowship, scholarship, job. Um, and it is something that most people that are a lot of time in a lab don't get to practice very often.
So we're here to help. We've all done quite a number of interviews, both successfully and, in my case, very unsuccessfully. So we're going to share a few tips and tricks from being on both sides of the kind of divide, if you like, doing interviews, but also being interviewed, right? Maria, you've done that a number of times too, right?
Yeah, I have interviewed people, students, and colleagues, and I have been interviewed a number of times for jobs, for uh, fellowships, online, in person, with a lot of people, with just one person. Yeah, it's weird.
Can be extremely nerve-wracking. That's completely normal. If you're listening to this live on LinkedIn, do put your comments into the chat box under this post and we'll see them live as we do our presentation today. Or if you're listening to this at some point in the future, hello, future Gareth and Maria, you can put comments on the post and we'll come back to you and answer them in the future. The things people fear most, Maria, this is a great image because right at the top, it's public speaking, right?
Yes, even more than dogs. And I am slightly afraid of dogs. The yappier, the worse. It's not the big dogs, it's the yappy small dogs that get to me.
Yeah, for me, it's the big dogs. Anyway. The important point here is that it's completely normal to be a bit nervous about giving a presentation, about doing an interview. In surveys, this kind of thing always comes at the very top of the list. And we also want to quickly have a look at some of those situations where you might find yourself talking to people or doing an academic interview. Right, Maria?
Yes, and a lot of people think that interviews are only the times when you are told that you are going for an interview. But a lot of the times when you're doing this kinds of presentations, at academic conferences, department meetings, informally to your colleagues, you may well be being evaluated. It's always important to do the best job possible, and it is important for your career that your colleagues and peers know that you have learned how to communicate your discoveries in a way that is understandable by most people.
You never know who's in the audience, right? We do these presentations. We never know who's going to be in the audience. Half the time we can't even see the audience. But, you know, if you always prepare and you always do the best job possible, you will be able to make that great first impression. It's something that sticks with people, right, Maria? That first impression that they make about you.
Yes, it's very important. It's the first 20 seconds, I think, or even less, that make up the first impression of you when you first enter a room. So your interview or your presentation starts way before you actually begin to speak. So it is important to look your best, to feel your best, and to always prepare and be engaging, be open to questions.
Which is something we're going to come back to and talk about in a moment. You've got to understand your audience. When you go to a conference or when you go to an academic interview for a PhD or for a job or for a grant application, you're always being interviewed. My father used to always say to me, when you go to a university as a visitor, be nice, be polite, be friendly to everybody that you meet. He used to ask everybody that a candidate had met over the course of a day at
Hmm.
his university doing interviews, what did they think of Dr. Maria? Because, of course, Dr. Maria might only be polite to people that she thinks are actually going to make a difference, right, Maria?
Yes. So it is very important. A lot of the time, whenever you go for an interview for an academic job, you go in and you talk, you do a presentation to whoever it is. Usually it's a larger group of people. And then you have a smaller group of people to ask you questions. And then you may have a one-to-one conversation with your potential boss. But a lot of the time, you go through and you visit the lab and you visit neighboring collaborators, and you get to talk to a lot of people, undergraduate students, graduate students, postdocs, colleagues. So all of those people can then be prodded about what they thought of you.
It's a two-way street too. So you're asking questions, you're finding out who these people are that you're talking to, what they do, what their role is within the university, within the team. And this is something that you really could do or should do before you get into that interview situation so that you can start to prepare beforehand. And I've certainly been in a number of interview situations. I can think of several immediately where I was totally unprepared. Great to prepare, right, Maria? Good idea.
Yeah, at least read the papers of the people you're that are going to be interviewing you. If there is a project that you're applying for, read the description and the associated bibliography and have questions prepared, because that means that you've engaged with the content, that you know roughly what you're talking about and you are interested. The worst thing that people can assess whenever they're interviewing you is that you're just looking for a job, that you're not actually interested in the work that it entails, or that you are not willing to research further and to read about, to do the intellectual work that it takes apart from all of the actual practical work.
We've got a few tips on here. Some of it sounds really obvious, but a lot of it will be important when you're going through that preparation phase. You've got the interview. Let's not forget that always the most difficult bit about a job interview is getting the interview in the first place, getting that PhD interview in the first place. You're going to be in a small group of people that they're actually considering for the position. So getting the interview is a win in the first place. So you can give yourself a pat on the back. Well done for getting the interview. That's a great achievement. Lots of people will not be in that position. Make sure now it's time to start preparing. So who are you going to be interviewed by? You can research those people before you go or go online. Read recent papers, as Maria said, so you can ask intelligent questions about the research of the person who's conducting the interview, and check the department website. For God's sake, it sounds so basic, but if you get asked a question about the department that you perhaps don't know the answer to, you could expose yourself as a bit of a charlatan, right, Maria?
Yes, and it's not just for PhD scholarships that you have those kinds of processes. For postdocs, for junior academic positions, you're always going to be going through this process. And often they'll ask you to talk about not just your research, but of what you've done before, but your plans as well. And it is important to have a very well defined idea in your head of what is possible to achieve within the limitations of the place where you are applying for.
And this is another great piece of advice that my good old dad used to share with me when I was going for academic interviews, PhDs, and jobs, and so on. He always used to say, well done. This is the difficult bit. Getting the interview, as I've already mentioned, is the hard part. It's not usually going to include many candidates. Of course, that depends on the position, depends on the university, and so on. But you've got a good chance of securing the position just by virtue of getting the interview. So let's not make any of those basic mistakes, right, Maria?
Exactly. So you are in a very good place. Research thoroughly and prepare. Take the time to prepare. If you have to travel to that for an interview or for a presentation, research the place as well, because those are the main questions that sometimes people will ask you if you have to relocate is, do you think you'll feel comfortable living in the place where you are going to have to live? And talk about what you like and what you dislike.
Let's talk a little bit about, some basics, things to do before you get to the interview. Getting there is the difficult bit, as we've already talked about. But I used to interview lots of people for PhD positions when I was an academic, and they hadn't become familiar with their own CVs in many cases. So do make sure that you know your own CV. What did you write in that covering letter? What have you told the university that you like to do in your spare time? Do you remember what you wrote? Is it really true? All of those kinds of things. Make sure you know the job, the application, the position backwards. Read your cover letter and definitely come prepared to ask questions and talk about yourself. It's not, as we've talked already, it's definitely going to be a bit of a two-way street. Can you remember one of your interviews, Maria? Any mistakes that you made along these lines in particular?
The basic questions of what are your strengths and weaknesses, and that is a staple of most interviews. And if you go on and you start saying that is really bad, because it means that you haven't thought about it properly, or that you haven't thought about it in that way. And don't try to frame your weaknesses or your weak points as strengths, because that just doesn't cut it.
So let's have a look about some preparations again to make before the interview itself. Again, it sounds basic, but you'd be amazed, appalled at how many people don't do this before they show up for an interview for a job or for a PhD. So we're going to want to revisit those job criteria, the job description, essential and desirable criteria. I can't speak today. When they ask you in the interview, why do you think you're a good fit for this position or for this PhD? What kind of things should you say, Maria?
So you can talk about technical skills, of course, that things that are required for you to do that you have learned to do before. But you can also talk about the way that you connect data between disciplines, the way you analyze data, and things you've learned outside, such as time management and project management, and talking to other people and collaborating with others and learning as you go. It's really important for any academic project, because we never know where research is going to take us, that you are willing to always learn new things and that you're a fast learner.
That is so true. That's really true. And the person interviewing you, the team interviewing you, are going to want to see that come through in the way that you project yourself and in the way that you talk about your skills in the interview itself. And it's a great idea if you're in a department, maybe you've got a group of colleagues, talk to other people about their experiences of going through this interview process. I remember, for example, my first experience doing an online interview, and that was not something that I'd ever done before. And when I got on that online interview, I totally freaked myself out because I just wasn't used to the experience of talking to people in an online setting. Of course, I'd done millions of face-to-face meetings and interviews in boardrooms, but not online. So that can be a disorientating experience for people as well. And we've got another great piece of advice, which is to try to organize mock interviews, to practice the interview with your supervisor, with other colleagues. Get yourself in that situation, right, Maria? So you can practice what kinds of questions and how you're going to manage yourself in the interview itself.
Yes, it's always good to do a mock or to do a practice, because then if you have good partners on the other side of the interview, what you'll do is you'll practice how to respond if you get interrupted, how to respond if people don't ask you any questions, how to respond when people doubt what you're saying, how to remain calm and remain engaged when people look distracted, bored, because all of those things can come up. And you need to find ways to manage yourself when dealing with those situations.
We have lots of presentations on the Sidetrain site, sidetrain.com. Have a look there. We could do a presentation for you on presentation skills. For example, teach you and your team, your university, your research group, how to do online presentations, how to do effective conference presentations. For example, managing these kinds of situations, super, super important. That's preparation. And of course, we can't talk we can't talk too much about that, because preparation for all of these kinds of situations is absolutely key. Practice, of course, makes perfect. But what about during the interview itself, Maria? That short period of time, maybe even as little as 15 minutes, half an hour, where you're going to be asked questions. What kinds of things should you have in mind during that tractor beam laser session where people are asking you about yourself?
So one of the main things that almost always comes up is, what are your major outputs, major achievements? What did you learn? What did you show that's novel? And what would you do? Sometimes people ask you what you would do differently at the end of the project, and if you learned something. But mainly, what are your plans, and how would you go about exploring the research question if you were given limitless funding? Also, some people are very keen on collaboration, so it's always important that you research not just the group that you are trying to interview for, but also key collaborators, especially if they're in an area that is in between subjects. And also for multidisciplinary works. So sometimes it is much harder to find someone who's suitable, who knows genetics, for instance, but is also aware of the intricacies of mathematical modeling. And if that is the case, then you would have people trying to at least ascertain if you know enough to be able to explain to the other party what it is that it's necessary.
I've been in this situation a number of times, like working as we both do, Maria, in kind of cross-disciplinary fields of research rather than being labeled in one particular area. It's quite a common question for somebody to ask. Well, this is a biology department, but how do you see yourself collaborating with other departments or faculties within this university? And so that's something that you need to be prepared for, those kinds of questions. In this institution, we're keen to develop collaborations between departments is a common question. What opportunities do you see for cross-disciplinary collaboration within this university and outside this university? And they're going to be very interested in your plans for developing not just publications, but getting money, cold, hard cash. What kinds of tips do you have, Maria, for those kinds of questions? What would you do if you had unlimited funding? How will you get more?
So scientists like toys, and we like to play with new things. So it's always good, and it's very good for institutions, that you know that you have the fancy new microscope, or that you have the skills to operate a new technology, but also importantly that you have pertinent research questions that you can answer with those tools. And you can attract collaborations from other institutions because of that. So if you want to be an expert in developmental biology and you have the new flying light sheet microscopy, you have to be able to tell people that you are aware of how to operate the bug, the machine, and how to best report data in that area, and that you are probably, a member of whatever microscopy society you want to be. That's just an example, but it's those kinds of attention to detail that you are involved in the field that you want to be in that is important to attract funding.
And this is a great slide. I love this slide. I really do. It's fantastic. So some of the soft skills, and this is a great kind of aid memoir for you if you're going into an interview situation. Yes, I do speak French, aide memoire. Just joking. You can talk about the different ways in which you are going to be able to contribute to the research group, to the lab, in addition to your brilliant skills as a researcher: brainstorming, project management, conflict resolution, team building, knowledge sharing. I don't know about you, Maria, but I never really realized how many transferable skills I picked up working as an academic until I wasn't working as an academic anymore.
Yes, because we are not told that. We are not told that we are learning those, and we are not told to value those. We are told to value publications and technical skills and scientific knowledge, but all of that comes because you are able to brainstorm, to generate new ideas. You are able to work with other people. Because you're working with people, you have to resolve conflicts, and sometimes those are really hard to deal with. You have to manage projects with different people, you have to build a team, and you have to know how to share knowledge across disciplines and with people from different backgrounds. So, one of the most important interviews I ever had to give was not for a job, it was with the technical staff of the facility I was working in with little animals, because they wanted to know where the knowledge and where the research that I was doing there was taking them. So what kind of I had to talk about the kinds of presentations I gave at conferences, the kinds of papers I published, the kinds of licenses I had to apply for. And that was incredibly important for them to get them on my side to help me with my work. It was very important to have that kind of conversation with them. And it was a very different kind of presentation for me because it was for people that knew a lot about animal husbandry but may not know what a growth factor was. And that was difficult to come to terms with.
That's a great example, though, because that's specifically about how you transmit your wider skills, your wider knowledge, like in all different kinds of environments. And it also touches on the idea of when you go for an interview, you're going to be talking to all different groups of people within the university, different knowledges, different areas of expertise. So that's really important. So what we do recommend you do with this slide, if you're preparing for an interview, write down your skills underneath these topics. What do you have in terms of project management? How good are you at collaborating? Because what interviewers love to do is they love to ask questions in these areas. Give me an example of your team building expertise, or building a team and it didn't go well, or how would you resolve a conflict? They like to talk about specific case studies in interviews, and so it's important that you come prepared with some specific case studies in your interview. And what about managing during the interview in terms of specific questions that you might get asked, Maria? We've got some questions here. We've got some example questions specifically for academic interview situations. We won't read them out, but you can have a look at these and see how you'd answer them.
So plans for publication is all very well and good, but you can talk about journals that are well respected in your field, but you can also talk about how your research is likely to produce outputs at regular intervals or irregular intervals. That is completely dependent on what you are going to do, and it will be applicable to the subject area where you're in. And more and more, it's important to talk about resolution of real world problems. So, COVID-19, for instance, brought about a lot of research into messenger RNA that wasn't highlighted before, that wasn't available before. So, a lot of people got exposed to knowledge and got ideas for new projects about RNA and about that molecule that wasn't available before. So, you can tell your interviewers that possibility gave rise to a new field that you're keen to explore, or that you would address something that you've done before but in a different light, or have a story about a problem you faced and how you dealt with it, or how important it was for you to learn how to deal with it.
Very common interview questions are on these slides. So do have a look at these slides. If you were starting your project again today, what would you do differently? Describe a research problem that you've encountered. What did you learn? And don't forget to do these things when you're talking to people in general, at conferences, at interviews, in your presentations. Eye contact, nod, smile, even if, like me, you're not in a very happy mood today. Be careful about oversharing. Check your impulses to use other people's names. Maria, repeatedly. Maria, never use first names in interviews. Dr. Machado, it's lovely to see you again today. Radiate accessibility. Match your speech cadences to those of other people. What about collaboration skills for leadership, Maria? What about these?
Oh, those are the buzzwords, the keywords that most people will talk to you about. They will ask you, how would you adapt after a challenge? How do you adapt to new environments? How do you adapt to a new project? How good are you at listening to feedback? How good are you at giving feedback? What the example of your time management, organization skills? A lot of the time, people will ask you, this is a very time consuming, resource consuming, intellectual draining project. How are you going to cope? And it is good that you have some sort of way, personal and that you can talk about, that you are going to cope with those things. But yes, once again, don't share too much. Just say, oh, I like walking. Don't say, I like walking at 3 o'clock at night and taking my dog out. No, it's good that you know yourself enough to be able to cope with stress, which is another very common question. How do you cope with stress, and how do you deal with it, and how do you engage with in stressful environments with people around you?
And this is another great slide helping people prepare for those kinds of interview situations. You're thinking about what transferable skills you have, where you're going to go with this in the future: visionary thinking, communication skills, teamwork, conflict resolution, empathy, adaptability, team building, decision making. We have at SciTrain lots of training courses in these areas, right, Maria? Is there anything in particular that we need to remind our eager listeners in this particular aspect?
So it's very important that you transmit, not by words, but by your posture and by your actions, trust. That people can trust you, and that you are able to trust other people, because that is a real good indication that you are able to delegate tasks, and that is a great skill for you to form collaborations and for you to be more productive. So have wider, broader outputs from your own PhD, postdoc, research project, because that means that people can delegate to you as well. So you will have a better understanding of the wider research area and the wider research field, and able to tailor yourself and your approach to whatever new research project comes your way.
And let's not forget that when you've done the interview, it's important to follow up. And we haven't touched on a great deal of detail in this short presentation today. But as I mentioned several times, if you'd like more information about soft skills, training for your researchers, training for yourself in presentation skills, interview skills, writing skills, and other publication skills, SciTrain.com could very well be the site for you. At the end of the interview, ask for a timeline. This is useful as it gives you an indication of how long you might expect to have to wait. Don't forget to take full contact details and respond promptly if you're asked for any follow-up. I think that we are coming to the end of our presentation today, Maria. It's always fantastic to do these events with you. If you'd like to get in touch, drop us a comment on the LinkedIn live feed. Maria, have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Great weekend.
Yes, and happy interviewing.